Welcome to Unsilent with your hosts Dave and Brian. This is not another current events podcast. We're digging deeper, diagnosing, and discussing what's really going on today, how we got here, and providing observations for future generations.
Welcome to Unsilent. We're Brian and Dave, and we'd love to hear where you think we got it right and where you think we completely missed the boat. You can do that on the unsilentpodcast.com website. You can do that on Rumble or Facebook or any of the other social channels. So we haven't actually talked for a little bit, Brian. It's been kind of boring, I guess, for the last couple of weeks. Nothing happened.
It's been 3 weeks since I've seen you, I think.
I think that's right. I think
maybe only two. We recorded 2 episodes a couple weeks ago because I was out of town last week. But I mean, the pace of news is not slowing down at all. It's still, I think it's pretty fair to say that more has happened in 6 weeks of Trump's presidency than happens in many 4-year presidencies.
Yeah, that's a fair statement. I mean, I was thinking last night after we just had the address to Congress, President Trump's address to Congress, and he said he's gotten more done in the first 6 weeks than most presidents get done in their entire 4 years.
Yeah.
And it's really, I mean, just objectively speaking, I think that's pretty well true. And more turmoil on the world's, I mean, the entire planet has been just roiling with all that's going on.
Yeah, and he's saying it in a very self-congratulatory kind of way. And I don't mean it quite like that. I just the volume of things that have happened, though, it's pretty substantial. There's no getting around that. So a couple things have happened over the last couple weeks, so that I think you and I talk about the fourth turning a lot, which I don't really talk about this part of it a lot, which is the generational changes as generations rise to where they're kind of in control and they kind of age out of that and things like that. That's part of what creates the. I think the authors of the book call it the constellation of generations. Like there's only 4 generations or 4 archetypes of generations, and they repeat themselves in the same pattern over and over. So each 25 years it's a new constellation of generations based on who's in power, who's born, who's coming of age, like that kind of stuff. All that to say, I saw something the other day that just kind of stuck out at me, which is we now have Gen Xers taking charge of some things. Like you look at the cabinet, Dan Bongino, Pam Bondi, Pete Hegseth, Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard.
Yep.
These are all Gen Xers.
Right.
And I think that is a factor in how they are perceived as like radical because, say what you want about Gen X, but we tend to be very self-sufficient and we tend to not want to be bothered. But if we have to be bothered, like we're just going to push people out of the way and get shit done.
Right. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's kind of what's happening now is like, okay, we've let these lumbering, aging
boomers,
political giants kind of run the show and from their perspective and a lot from mine as well. Like, we've given them ample rope to try to fix it. They're not doing it. So like, just get the hell out of the way and let us do it now.
Right.
And I think that speaks to the pace. Like we were just talking about how fast things are happening, but this is the way they're doing things is a very Gen X way to do it.
Yeah, it is. It's a very, I'm also struck about how it's a very business-like way to do a lot of this stuff. There's a lot of transactionality in it. A lot of what the president's doing is very transactional. It's not institutional, in other words. So it's like, here's how we do things in this institution. No, it's not. We're not talking about how here's a goal. We got to get this goal done. We're going to do things completely differently in a sort of an entrepreneurial way. And the institutionalists are freaking out because no, that's not how it's done. We can't do it this way. So it's
you have to worry about people's feelings, and these things take time to think out. Take time to think out and things like that. And that is not how Gen X does things.
No, not at all. Not at all. And the results, I mean, I expected things to change, but I didn't expect them to change with this pace. So the statistic that really stood out to me is we're at the lowest number of illegal border crossings that have ever been measured. I mean,
14 yesterday, as you and I are recording this. 14 yesterday.
Yeah, I mean that.
Now, that might be one sector. That might be the San Diego sector, the Yuma sector. I don't know, but They were promoting that 14 illegal crossings yesterday.
Yeah, and so and the institutional way of doing things was saying, well, we need to pass a bill. It's got to have these things in it, and
Yeah.
the one of the one-liners, this may or may not be lost to history, but one of the one-liners I thought was really good last night in the speech was, "You thought you needed a new bill, you just needed a new president."
Yeah, that was, and you're referring to the State of the Union speech that Trump gave last night,
Right, right.
um, and yeah, one of the things that, like him or hate him, he just says what is in a
Yeah,
way that is both cutting to the opposition and endearing to his supporters,
yeah,
because he just cuts through all the nonsense. And what he said is 100% right. We heard,
yeah,
uh, I don't know, 30% of Kamala Harris's interviews were talking about, we need to get border or immigration reform done, and we need to get Congress on board, and we need to have these revisions and changes and whatever. And he came in just like, okay, it's done. Now
yeah.
what?
Right. Yeah. Now what? 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Well,
I mean, that was like day two, wasn't there? Day one,
well,
maybe.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the results are visible in 6 weeks, but yeah, exactly. He just started issuing executive orders. They got done, and that was kind of the end of that. So I do think that there's the other thing that's interesting for Kenny G for his day and age to look for is whoever sort of breaks the mold and leads you into whatever this crisis era is going to be a disruptor. It's going to be somebody that doesn't play by the conventional rules. And
Yeah.
there is no question at all that Trump is that kind of disruptive personality. And they're
Yeah.
not going to. I mean, the watching that we talked about the inauguration and about how it would have been uncomfortable to be anybody sitting behind Trump during the inauguration, or how uncomfortable it would have been to be Trump when you got a bunch of people that are behind you who basically hate you. And
Yeah.
but last night I had that same exact feeling and thought as I was watching this, and it goes to that personality of the disruptor. He stood before an audience, this half wildly cheering for him, this half looking at him, holding up little pithy little signs or shaking a
Yeah.
cane out of your, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
You've done a lot of public speaking, Brian. I've done a fair amount of public speaking. When you've lost half the crowd from moment one, that's uncomfortable as a speaker. I mean, you
It's
want to
not
stay on
fun.
track. No, it's not fun.
Yeah.
You got your notes, you want to stay on track, you want to exude but I don't think he even cared. I think
I
he loved
I
it,
think it
actually.
honestly, at this point, I think it energizes him. I
Yeah.
think I think that speaks to the tribalism. In order for our team to win, the other team has to lose. I think that
Right.
that's kind of baked into it.
Yeah.
But even that aside, I mean, what else could they do to the man? You know what I mean?
I
Like,
mean, they've
it's almost like,
impeached him.
I've taken everything you possibly throw at me. Your little, like you said, your little pithy signs, and
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
wagging your finger at me. Like, if that's what you got tonight, like, bring it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. I know that was. I mean, I really think again for Kenny G as he looks at our era and says, "What's my era like in comparison with his era?" I think you'll have to look for somebody with that kind of disruptive capability. You're going to have to look for somebody who's willing to challenge all the status quos
Yeah.
because things are so broken. Things have become so broken. I mean, we don't even know what the difference between a woman and a man is, or who should be competing in sports.
It's funny you say that. I heard somebody about a week ago. I think it was a podcast when I was on an airplane, and they were talking about the French Revolution, and they made a statement, something like, during the French Revolution, they even went so far as to change the names of the days of the week.
Yeah.
And immediately, my reaction was, "What a bunch of dumbasses! Like, who would do that?" And then the next thing the podcaster said was, "Just like we've changed the genders." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, we're right
There
there."
you go. There you go. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
the person that
Uh,
rescues us from this era has to be bold. They have to be utterly
yeah.
bold. I mean, so you stand up there and say, the Panama Canal got a raw deal. We're taking it back. I mean, he said,
Yeah, we're taking
we're
it back.
taking it back. I mean, whoa, Greenland. Hey, I got a message for you, citizens of Greenland. If we respect your right to choose.
Yeah. But one way or the other, it's going to be ours. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, what? Yeah, exactly.
And it's funny if you go back. I don't know about George Washington so much, but I know that Abraham Lincoln was not popular
Yeah.
at all.
Oh yeah.
Like
Yeah.
he was wildly unpopular. I'm learning as history is kind of rhyming. It's not repeating itself, but
Right.
rhyming with previous eras. I'm learning how much FDR was hated. I had no
Yeah.
idea how much he was despised by
Oh yeah.
half the country thought we were moving into communism.
Yeah.
And as he was doing all these things like the New Deal and all these Hoover Dam and these big public works things, basically subsidizing American employment,
Right.
people hated that. Like
Yeah.
they really and so I think for my generation, that was definitely lost in the textbooks and history classes
Right.
and things like that. That was not. I mean, FDR was like arguably for my teachers who were very progressive, of course.
Yeah.
He's like the guy. I mean,
Yeah.
even him and JFK would be like the two that they would hold up and be like, "This is what a good president looks like," right? But he was wildly unpopular leading up to that. Lincoln was maybe the most unpopular president ever. If we had any kind of metrics to measure that kind of thing like we do now, he would probably have ranked the lowest popularity of any president.
Right.
And then here's Trump, same thing.
Yep.
And again, I'm not saying whether it doesn't matter if you agree or disagree with his positions on things. It fits the mold for these disruptors.
Yeah, it does. And that's the only kind of person, and that's the only kind of person that could go through this era. And I think the reality is there are very few people. I think. I mean, this is an assumption on my part, but there's very few people that can stand in those positions and be like that, because most people are going to be shaped and are going to be. Most people who go to Washington D.C. are shaped by Washington D.C. They don't go there to basically break everything and start over.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's fortunate that we get these disruptors like Lincoln I think FDR's domestic policy. The only thing that saved FDR was the fact that he was a great wartime president. I mean, otherwise he would have been the history on FDR would have looked quite a bit different, I think. But it's that they're at the right place at the right time, and they've got the right personality for that job, and they seem to emerge. They just seem to come out. They seem to pop up when we need them.
They have to, because somebody has to be willing to take the tomatoes.
Yeah.
Somebody has to be willing to say, yeah, I know you all hate my guts, and I still think I'm right, and nobody else is in a position or has the cojones to say so, and I guess it'll be me, and this kind of goes, like last time or a couple times ago I was talking about feels to me like a critical piece of this going from crisis era to the next one 80 years later is, as the crisis era resolves, people are really bound by duty, responsibility, obligation, honor, doing the right thing, even if nobody knows.
Right.
Like there's stories of people who did tremendous things in World War II. Their grandchildren never even know about it until they go to the funeral, and like people they were telling their grandchildren that this thing happened because grandpa never talked about it.
Right.
And now we're at the opposite extreme where virtue signaling is the thing. Like everyone, not everyone, many people want the benefits, but not the actual effort. And so it's a complete inversion of that. And we're seeing little pieces of this completely unfold or unwind. Trump's a good example. Again, it doesn't matter if you like his policies or not. He's willing to do the thing and get zero credit for it.
Yeah.
Dan Bongino has a podcast he makes between his podcast and radio show. He makes somewhere around $5 million a year, giving all that up to go be the second in command of the FBI.
Yeah.
Because
it's amazing.
Duty requires that. He has a yearning to do the right thing, even though it's going to cost him personally. And I think that those are the people who are willing to take the tomatoes.
Yeah.
And it's attractive to the people who are in their tribe.
Sure,
you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing, it is attractive to the average person as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you take I saw some of the stats on the approval from last night, from his speech last night, and of course he got the Republicans. But the other interesting thing is he got most of the independents too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the people that are going to hate Trump, the TDS folks, and the folks that are, they're going to hate him. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what he does. He could have brought Mother Teresa back from the dead, and the Democrats would have stayed in their seats, looking glower at each other.
Yeah.
So it's
which he started off his speech by announcing yesterday.
Well, yeah. See, and as a marketer, Brian, that was brilliant. That was
Yeah. He set a perfect trap.
As a negotiator, the first thing you do as a negotiator is you take their point and you put it on the table and you deal with it so they don't have to throw it at you anymore. I mean, that's exactly what he did. He took their point. He said, no,
Yeah,
nothing I can say is going to make you happy. And he put it on the table. And now that's off the table. I mean,
yeah.
say what you will.
Well,
People say he's dumb. He's not dumb.
yeah, I don't think he's dumb. I think he's I don't mean simple like his brain is simple. I think he's
Sure.
very smart and I think he's very but
Sure.
he just does basic maneuvers and
Well,
does them really,
yeah.
really well.
Yeah.
It's not complex, it's not super sophisticated. He does very basic things, but he executes very, very well.
Well, he's got good. See, here's the thing that I would say. I read this one article that I really agreed with up until the point when it said that Trump is playing chess and he's 10 moves ahead. No, no, no.
Yeah.
Trump is playing poker and he's got a feel for what the other person has in their hand and what he has in his hand. And he's got the brashness to pull off any bluff he wants to pull off. He's
Yeah.
got the instinct to do that. So I'm not degrading the man at all, but I think he's got the innate instinct and the innate ability to kind of read the room, read what's going on, see what he needs to say. I mean, he says outlandish things. He says, well, the statement about, well, in the top 10 presidents, it turned out that I was number one. And sounds like George Washington was number two. Well, and
Yeah.
then, I'm not sure about that last part. Self-deprecating humor. Of course, the left, what? George Washington? That's like,
Yeah.
and he was
Who they want to remove from the name, all the names of the schools named Washington. They want to get rid of all that. And Washington State, where you live, is getting rid of him on the
yeah,
flag.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. But again, like the way it manifests is different between him and Lincoln, let's say.
Of course.
But it's the same kind of confidence.
Yeah.
He just is very external in how he says it. I'm guessing
Right.
Lincoln was probably much more of an introverted person and
Yeah.
soft spoken and whatever. And then maybe that was because that was what it required in the era or whatever. But if you in today's era, if you didn't have that pride or
Yeah.
ego or whatever you want to call it, like you would not be able to stand up to the crowd. There's no way.
Right.
You would get run over.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's what
Absolutely.
I guess what I'm saying is I think that's what the moment needs
Yes.
for getting things back on track is somebody who's just so brash and so out there, like, I don't care, throw whatever you got at me, I'm the best, and that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And in this era, I don't think there'd be a different type of person who could have that. I don't think a Lincoln type character could do it in this era because of
Right.
all of social media and the news and like things like that. It was just a different
Yeah.
time.
You have to be.
On the flip side, you and I just a month ago were talking about how the momentum is changing and like people are kind of coming together and getting on board. And you just mentioned that, like, I don't know, it was like 75% or something like that. That people watched the speech, thought he did a pretty good job or whatever the number was. But there's still these little flare ups of people doing the virtue signaling and whatever. So like what was it, last Friday, the Zelensky meeting at Trump's office where
Yeah.
it sounds like, I don't know, there's a couple different theories, but it sounds like what might have happened is Zelensky met with some Democratic leaders and they kind of coached him up on how to handle Trump.
Yeah.
And he demanded that the cameras be rolling during this conversation that normally would have been behind the scenes.
Yeah.
That's the gist I got, and I may have a bit of that wrong, but
No,
that's
right.
kind of the version
That's
I've
exactly
heard.
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So then he starts acting out, and he just gets like waylaid by JD Vance and Trump.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So okay. Then the reaction is because Trump did a thing. I saw a flurry of Ukrainian flags as profile pictures again that I have not seen in like 3 years. I seemed like that was a thing that was the past.
Sure.
And like scrolling through social media, like all these Ukrainian flags are popping up again. I'm like, wait a second, I thought this was gone, and it's not, Dave. It's still it's still there.
Yeah. Well, and it's you're exactly right, and it's exactly because and I've challenged a bunch of those people to throw up those Ukrainian flags. I got in all sorts of arguments over the weekend about this whole Ukraine thing because I know something about it, and and nobody who throws those flags up really knows anything about the situation. They probably can't point out Ukraine on a map or know a Kiev but it's just another proxy for I hate Trump.
Yep.
It's just another
Yeah.
proxy for Trump's just a bad guy, and so therefore Trump's mean. I mean, it fits the narrative, right? So the narrative is Trump's mean, Trump's a bad guy. Whatever he does must be bad. So he beat up Zelensky, and therefore Zelensky good, Trump bad. I stand with Ukraine. So I mean,
But if your ROI calculation is based upon looking like you're doing the right thing and risking nothing,
yes,
it's the right play.
yes,
None of those people probably have kids in the military who are at risk of going to war
right,
over there.
right,
Their tax dollars that fund the efforts are a collective pool, and like, okay, if the money comes out of my paycheck every 2 weeks, I don't miss it, so it doesn't really cost me anything to be able to make this grand pronouncement of how I stand with Ukraine.
right.
It's all ludicrous until you figure out. Wait a second, it's completely logical if your ROI calculation is based upon what's the most amount of benefit for the least amount of effort. Then
Yes.
it's the smartest play.
Well, and that is exactly the kind of tack I took in my little debates with a variety of people. I've got a friend in the UK, and he put that up and said, "Okay, so tell me what I stand with Ukraine means in terms of what you are advocating for to save one Ukrainian life." And I said, "Look,
Yeah.
the way I see it, you've got two things. You should either be petitioning the PM of the UK, Keir Starmer, to send," and I actually gave him the brigade numbers. I mean, I know something about the UK armed forces. There's about 70,000 standing army, 100,000. Anyway, so I said, petition him to send this combat brigade team, what they call them over there, to Ukraine. Then I will believe you. Or petition him to send 20 billion pounds more to Ukraine and double your taxes. You petition him to that, and then I will believe you stand with Ukraine. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I don't believe you. Your statement's
Right.
just a bunch of BS. So,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
said that to a lot of Americans too. It's like, well, okay, the other question, if you want to stand with Ukraine and you're an American, okay, the Europeans are weak. Okay, they can't defend themselves. They're not going to send enough troops there to fight Russia. They have no capability of fighting Russia. The only force on the planet that could fight Russia is us. I mean, so Britain is a nuclear force, right? They have their nuclear power. Guess what? They put their nukes on missiles they lease from us. We don't give them missiles. They got no nukes. I mean, so France is a legit nuclear power, but Britain, not so much. So, you take all of these people together, they don't have an ability to support that. So I said, look, Americans, if you stand with Ukraine, then how many tens of thousands, because it'll take tens of thousands, how many tens of thousands of dead American troops are you willing to commit to sending Ukraine? Not
Yeah.
one person was willing. No, we can't do it. We got to negotiate with. You're full of baloney.
I don't think that, and I don't know all this stuff that well. So I'm not saying this as if I have some knowledge that nobody else does, but I don't think most Americans understand the scale of death that's happening over there.
No,
I don't. I mean, I heard a number of 750,000 people have died over there. That could be right, and
it's
but I
low.
don't
That's
think.
low, actually. It's
Yeah,
like
I don't. I don't
100,000
think.
Russians and hundreds of
Yeah,
thousands of Ukrainians. It's just
I don't think anyone even understands the stakes. I don't think anyone even understands the cost so far, and like, and again, I just go back to what you and I've talked about a million times in the Middle East, in Europe, in that whole continent, those continents over there. They they make decisions based on different criteria than we do.
exactly
They
right.
have they have feuds that go back centuries, if not millennia.
Yeah,
I mean, the idea that we're going to be able to just step in there and like wave our magic wand and solve problems, it's ludicrous, right?
yeah,
Whatever. So, and then the thing that goes along with that is anyone who wants Ukraine to have to do what's necessary to end the war is a Putin puppet, right? So that's
yeah,
the other thing that like
exactly.
it doesn't matter who you are if you say anything that's not Russia should completely go back to where they came from and give back all the money and rebuild and all that kind of stuff, then you're a Putin puppet.
Right.
And again, this is just indicative of tribalism. I don't think Putin's a great guy,
No.
and I also think that NATO and us we violated our word. We said we wouldn't go 1 inch further east,
Sure.
and then like 7 countries later, he finally 7 countries of expansion later, he finally said, "This is my red line. Like you do it again, like I'm
Yeah.
acting on it." And we did it again, and he acted on it.
Yeah.
And but all that nuance gets lost.
Right.
You're either for me or against me. You know what I mean? There's no such thing as like I think he's not a good guy. I also think, given where he's at in his situation, it's kind of hard to argue what he did. Also, like bad people can make good decisions, just like good people can make bad decisions.
Right, absolutely. Well,
that whole notion is just completely lost, though, right? It's just
well, the
it's
subtlety of all of it is lost on most people because most people, first of all, what you said earlier, most people don't understand the mentality of these folks. So the Russian war machine has operated for a century or more on this notion of the meat grinder. So basically,
yeah
as long as they've got 130 million population, 133 million is their population, they can keep throwing bodies, live young Russian men and women, into the meat grinder to die horribly. And we freak out, and rightfully so, when a soldier here is killed, a soldier there is killed. Compared to what the 800,000 some odd soldiers that Russia has lost, you know, I don't think we've ever lost 800. We've never lost that many soldiers in
I
American
don't know if
history.
we've lost 800,000. Well, in the Civil War we lost 600,000.
Six
So
hundred thousand, yeah, but
yeah,
not in any one conflict. We've never lost. That Civil War is the closest. So, but there's a mentality there. There's that kind of Slavic, stoic, mentality that people in the U.S. when they look at Putin, and you've seen all those photos where Putin's on horseback, he's bare chested, and he's riding his horse. He's a middle aged dude riding a horse, and people in the U.S. are like, "What a goofball!" But if you understand Russian culture, if you understand Slavic culture, you'll understand that level of machismo that he is
yeah.
demonstrating there, it works. It's one of the things that's kept him in power. This vision of him as a strongman. They like strongmen. If you know anything about Russia, one of the things that surveys over and over and over have revealed about Russia is the most popular. If you just survey everybody and say, what system of government has Russia had that we should have again? That's the best system for our people. And the thing that comes up on top is Tsarism. It's
Yeah.
number one. It's Tsarism. It's not, we thought, okay, the Cold War is over and Russia's going to be a nice Western democracy and they're going to put Starbucks on every corner. They would rather have a czarist dictator than they would have a nice parliament and the way that
Yeah,
we
but it makes sense though. Like, why would you want that? Because the czar is going to take care of me, and I don't have
exactly.
to do much.
The strong man is popular. The strong man over here is not popular. The strong man
Yeah,
there is popular. And the problem that all cultures have is they interpret other people's actions through what they would be doing if they were the ones making those actions, what they would be thinking.
yeah,
And so that's why people, for instance, they rebel against Trump because he's brash, he's bold, he says the number of things he says are outlandish. He makes claims from time to time which are completely for effect. I mean, so for instance, he knows we have not sent $350 billion to Ukraine. That's just objectively false. But why does he say that? Because when you're going to buy the car, I can pay 5,000 no more. I know you want 10,000, 5,000 no more. I've
yeah.
my best and final offer. I'm walking if you come back with anything else. You settle on 5,500.
Right.
It's just a negotiating tactic. And
But even though his number is wrong, when as people begin to defend and say that's wrong, the inevitable question comes up: what's the real number?
right,
And then
sure,
that has to get disclosed by the person attacking him for saying that.
exactly.
Again, he does simple things very well.
Exactly right. Exact simple. And yeah, he's a master at manipulating those situations and to his
Yeah.
to his advantage.
Yeah. So one other thing, and then we'll get to a little more on the inauguration speech because I think there's a couple of things that are really really fascinating. But last week, or no, this is only a couple of days ago, Trump approval rating by age, 65 plus, 45%. So a lot of baby boomers very much in the Kamala Biden camp, no
Yep.
question. 40 to 64, 46%.
Mm-hmm.
So again, the post Vietnam people who are of that age, very much against Trump because
Right.
they grew up hating Nixon and
Right.
it's partisan, right?
It is.
In my
Yep.
view, I don't, maybe I'm
Yep.
wrong, but 18 to 39 though, 60%.
Yeah, isn't that something?
60% 18 to 39. And again, I go back to the same thing. Like the players are different, the politics are different, but the behavior is the same. The
Yeah.
young people like this, just like the young people liked Richard Pryor, and just like young people liked, people in the 60s and 70s who were Joni Mitchell and whatever, and they hated the establishment and they spoke out against the establishment. The elders of the establishment talked about what quacks they were and kooks, and you don't know what you're talking about and whatever.
Yep.
And then you fast forward 60 years, and those people who were young kooks are now running the show.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly right.
And now they're pissed that the next generation of young people is supporting a guy they don't like. It's this, again, it's the same behavior. The politics are different for sure. They're 180 degrees different, but the behavior is 100% the same.
Well, and this goes back to the point that we make over and over, and that is human nature is human nature. And whether you're in the 1800s, you're in the 1900s, 2000s, 2100s, in the next age, the human nature is, it doesn't really change much. It doesn't really change from ancient Mesopotamia to now. It's just a matter. And this is the frustrating thing, I suppose, in a lot of ways. And this is why there's these 80-year cycles, is because you get a little older, and hopefully you start to recognize human nature for what it is, but and then by the time you really have a lock on it, you get senile and die. So that's but if we started off with an innate understanding of human nature, then we would probably get farther as a civilization, but not to be.
So we talked about like the resurgence of the Ukraine flags and profile pictures, and kind of, in my view, kind of the absurdity of that. Again, I'm right there with you. I would have a whole different level of respect for people who do that if they had skin in the game.
Yep.
They don't.
Yep.
But they want the praise that comes with being right, but they don't want to risk anything that's meaningful, like their kids or their money or like whatever, right? And after watching the inauguration or the State of the Union speech last night, a couple things really stood out at me. One was, it was entertaining. And I don't mean like I enjoyed every bit of it. I just mean it was entertaining. Like, train wrecks or captivate your attention. That doesn't mean that you enjoy watching train wrecks. But it wasn't a train wreck. It was very pro-American.
Yep.
He said some outlandish things, but again, 80% of that's probably a starting negotiating point, not where we're going to end up, which is, he's proven over and over again, as people lash out and criticize his initial statement. If you look 4 weeks later, how we actually end up is usually a pretty solid place.
Yep.
So,
that's true.
But the media, I really thought that they had I keep thinking they have to figure it out. I keep thinking that these two entities have to figure out. Democrats have got to figure out why they lost.
Yeah.
And the media's got to figure out why they lost credibility. And I keep thinking, like, every week, okay, this is it. They're going to figure it out here. Like, they're going to figure it out. And each week they don't. No. And each week there's so many videos. I struggled to even pull one. I'm going to share one with you about the media, but I didn't pull one on the Democrat Party. But what's her name? The gal from Texas. She's become very outspoken in the last few weeks. Congresswoman from Texas. She's, I don't know, I'm guessing mid-30s, young black woman, very outspoken. She's been on every TV show. Like,
I can't remember her name. Yeah.
Anyhow, she's on it. She's on all these shows, and her and others, they keep going back to, people just need to listen to us.
Right.
We just need to get our message better, and people just need to understand.
Yeah.
And every time she says that, I keep thinking, you don't recognize who has the role of listener in this relationship.
Right.
You're the elected representative.
Right.
You're not the elected moral czar.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You're not the priest.
And until they figure out who's supposed to listen to who, I think that they're lost.
Yeah.
And I'm going to share this clip now, that because this blew me away last night. This happened right after the State of the Union address. So to set this up, one of the ways that Democrats really just showing that they're just not. It feels like they're not living in the moment. It feels like they're not aware of like what's actually happening. Right. So Trump did his normal stuff that we talked about, like Greenland's going to be ours, the Panama Canal is going to be ours. I solved immigration. I'm the greatest president since George. Right. All those things that they obviously don't agree with. But he did, I don't know, half dozen things that anyone would seemingly support. Like, he talked about planting a flag on Mars. Okay, well, that's not a pro-Trump thing. That's a pro-American ingenuity kind of thing. Like, we used to, arguably the greatest speech JFK ever gave was the one where we're going to get to the moon by the end of the decade. Like, Abraham Lincoln, arguably the greatest speech he ever gave was talking about how we're gonna build a better union, and like all the like the and so they didn't like that. But the ones that really stuck out to me, there was a 13-year-old kid there, a young boy who had brain cancer, diagnosed like 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
was given 5 months to live, has lived 6 years, wants nothing more in the world than to be a police officer.
Right.
So Trump sends the new director of the Secret Service over to him and gives him a badge and gives him honorary status in the Secret Service.
Right.
No applause.
Yeah.
No support of that.
Yeah.
A guy, a guy, Trump announced at the State of the Union address, this guy who wanted to go to West Point, he said, "Oh, by the way, you're going to West Point." And the guy found out right there in the speech. No applause for that. Like nothing, right? And so I at the end, I'm like, well, the optics of that don't look really good. Even if you don't like the guy, you still have to be aware there's 37 cameras on you.
Exactly.
And he says these things. Half the audience, like you said earlier, stands up and erupts and cheers, and the other half sits on their hands on these objectively pro-American things that are hard to like. They're just human things. Like a young kid surviving brain cancer. It's a human thing. That's not a partisan thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So the thing ends, and I think, okay, well that was really low. That they can't get much worse than that. But then,
okay,
then I was scrolling through social media afterwards, and I came across this clip here. And this is the gal from CNN. I don't remember her name. You probably know who she is. No, this is MSNBC, I guess.
Oh,
this is
Rachel Maddow one.
Yeah, Rachel Maddow's in the video, but it's this other gal who's talking. What is her name? Let me see if I can find her name. Nicole Wallace. Okay.
Yes, Nicole Wallace. Yeah.
So this is Nicole Wallace's take on the 13-year-old kid with brain cancer. Here she is, about 45 seconds long. Here you go.
But I think this was a lesson in finding one thing that you let yourself feel. And I let myself feel joy about DJ. And I hope he's alive for another, 95 years, right? And I hope he lives and the life he wants to live. He wants to be a cop. He knows what he wants to do. And maybe when you have childhood cancer, that crystallizes for you. And I hope he has a long life as a law enforcement officer. But I hope he never has to defend the United States Capitol against Donald Trump supporters. And if he does, I hope he isn't one of the 6 who loses his life to suicide. And I hope he isn't one who has to testify against the people who carried out acts of seditious conspiracy and then live to see Donald Trump pardon those people.
So
what? Look at her face when I hope he lives, a long life, 95. I mean, she looks like she's doing a eulogy at a funeral when she's saying these things that, are nice about the kid, but you can tell it's all just a lead up to, but I hope she's not Satan or I hope he's not, turns out to be not Satan like Donald Trump. I mean,
yeah.
So self-defeating.
And again, I'm sure I'm not suggesting that only progressive folks can do this. I'm certain that there's many folks on the more conservative side who, if the roles reversed, would find a similar. But the humanity that's left us is just jarring to me.
Yeah.
How could you see that story and that's what comes to mind for you to talk about in front of 100,000 people or how many people are watching them? How was the story not? This was a really cool moment. How awesome for him, and the hug he was giving his dad, and the hug he gave the Secret Service guy. It was a truly authentic human moment.
Right.
And for that not to be allowed to be the story was just absolutely jarring to me. I was just absolutely shocked.
Yeah, I guess I'm not shocked, but I guess I'm saddened that these people have. I mean, I remember a lot of these joint addresses to Congress and firesides and all this other stuff. The speeches presidents done, and presidents have always brought people that they've had, or not always, but for a good period of time, they brought people that highlighted success stories. Now, and when Barack Obama did it, when Bill Clinton did it, when others did these kinds of things, you would find everybody would clap. They wouldn't clap for everything, but they wouldn't clap for absolutely nothing because like that. But each of those stories was a truly human story, but it's also truly an American story. I mean, it's an overcomer story. The kid who beats brain cancer and he wants to be a cop. I mean, that's as American as apple pie. I mean, it's just nothing better than that. And for them not to clap for that, for them, it really, I mean, the word that comes to mind is TDS, Trump Derangement Syndrome, because you
100%.
look at that and a normal Democrat would say, I don't agree with Trump, but I'm glad for the kid. I mean, what she did there was not was not that. It was not, because she was, I mean, she looked like she was about to cry when she was talking about I hope he lives for 95 years and but I hope he never, I mean, it's her presentation. Don't these people know anything about how to present in public? Anyway, it was just, it was bizarre to see. And it's never really happened before. I mean, this whole, the low that everybody felt, not everybody, but the low that the left fell to last night was a new low. I mean, do you remember? You remember Joe Wilson, 2009, when Barack Obama was presenting about Obamacare, and he stood up and
he
said,
yelled,
"You lie."
you lie, yeah.
And he got censured, and he was roundly criticized by Republicans. He was roundly criticized. Well, yeah, and Obama did lie, by the way. I mean, that was a lie. Obama had all sorts of lies about that, but.
Well, by the way, that's what presidents do in those speeches. That's kind of how it works.
Yeah, that's kind of how the spin works. But there was a certain amount of decorum. I mean, Joe Wilson is a piker. He's nothing. He's a kindergartner in being offensive in comparison with all those people sitting there. Well, and I don't know if you wanted to talk about this more, but the 77-year-old congressman, I can't remember his name, who was
Al Green.
Al Green, yeah. He was raising his cane, and the thing about that one, Brian, that was bizarre is he was ranting and raving about not getting Medicare taken away, things that Trump doesn't want to touch. Trump has never even talked about. In fact, the only thing that Trump said about these things was he's not going to touch them. He's going to leave them alone.
But again, Dave, if the calculation is based upon what's the most reward with the least amount of risk, Trump has not talked about Medicaid. Now, I don't believe that we're going to get through this fiscal crisis without touching Medicaid.
No, we're not. That's not true.
I don't believe. Now, I don't know. Yeah. There's far smarter people than me dealing in that world that hopefully have a solution. I just don't think the math pencils to keep all that stuff. Okay, that aside, Trump has very deliberately not talked about that. Anything, he's deliberately said, I'm not going to touch this stuff, even though I kind of believe eventually you're going to have to because we're going to run out of money, right? Yep. But he's been very deliberate to not say that. And so what that guy did was he took the highest ROI with the least amount of risk. Go after him for a thing he hasn't said about. You get to be on camera with your cane, and you get to have your picture in the video of you doing the thing. But there's no risk because there's no argument been made about that. Like the risk of him being put in his place on any kind of factual argument is a moot point because there's no argument. Like
but that also says something about our society, too. The fact that there's no risk that he could say all these things that are completely factually. I mean, you could criticize Trump. There's plenty of things you could criticize him as a Democrat for that he's actually said. But to criticize him for something he's actually said, and to think that you're going to get away with criticizing him for something that he didn't do. And he didn't.
Right, but if you criticize him for something he said, you have to support your argument with facts.
So it's even
this thing. He didn't have to support any argument with facts. There's no risk for him. There's none. I mean, he might get censored or whatever. But okay, who cares? Adam Schiff got censored, and he was elected to the Senate. Like, who cares, right?
Everybody will know his name as the one that challenged Trump and waved his cane.
Yeah. And he, anyhow, it was to me like a perfect encapsulation of virtual signaling. He gets to stand there, wag his cane at Trump, and make a big scene. Zero risk of being called out for anything other than by the Republicans saying you shouldn't behave like that. But his argument, he didn't have to worry about making his argument because there's no argument.
No argument to make. Yeah. So bizarre. It's so bizarre.
Yeah. And then the other, there's a couple other things. There was Laken Riley's family was there from the Laken Riley Act. She was the one killed by the immigrants. And there was another gal there. I don't remember her name. Nongare or something like that. Anyhow, they're there. No applause. Like again, they no acknowledgement that of the human story. Forget the politics of it. The human story. Like there's no acknowledgement that these parents lost their children. It was, and again, I'm not suggesting that only hardcore left progressives can behave that way. I know that there are people who are in the conservative camp who do that. It's just, it seems more prevalent, maybe because that's my bias, or it could be they're more vocal on social media and things like that, which I think is probably true. But it's just it shows what our society is like right now. We're devoid of that human thing for people who are in the other camp.
Well, and I think this is one of the appeals then of Trump and of the Republican Party right now, because I think your average person, your average American, I would guess that 85% of Americans would look at that little boy DJ, I think was his name if I remember
Yeah.
correctly, would look at
Yeah.
DJ's story and they'd tear up a little bit. I mean, this kid's got he beat brain
Fantastic
cancer.
story.
He wants to become a policeman. I mean, what's
Yeah.
more American than becoming a
But
cop?
it's a cute story of a little boy who I think it's an awesome story.
Exactly. And if you can't if you can't appreciate that story, then anybody who can appreciate that story looks completely normal. So the ones that look like the average everyday kitchen table conversation, I bump into them in the backyard when I'm taking a walk out to get my paper in the morning, those are the people that were the ones that looked normal. These people
Yeah.
looked abnormal, and part of the reason you're wondering, well, how do they not, like this Nicole Wallace, how do they not recognize that they look awful, they look horrible? And I think, Brian, it's because they won for so long with this dour, the other side is Satan. And I mean, I remember back in Bill Clinton's days when it's like, well, yeah, if you oppose this legislation, you just want to take grandma in a wheelchair and push her off a cliff. And it's
Right.
like, what are you talking about? I just want a better piece of legislation. So they've won for that for so long that it takes them. The ship of malign presentation and intent takes so long to turn around that they haven't got the message yet. Now, as I was watching all this last night, I thought, here's what will probably the only thing that's going to turn them out. Typically, in 2 years, the Democrats will gain seats back in Congress and in the Senate. That's typically the
Yeah.
pattern that happens. Now, if that does not happen this time around, and we won't know until the votes are all counted, the legit ones at least,
Yeah.
we won't know.
Well, in Arizona where I live, you won't know for about 4 months after.
Yeah, we'll probably know by the end of Trump's presidency when we're in Arizona. But I think what will turn them around, possibly in some fashion or form, is if they do not do well in the midterms. If they do well in the midterms, then that will be to them justification that, well, no, Trump and all this rah rah American flag stuff, that's just an anomaly. It's not a real thing. But if they lose that election too, then I think they're going to have to face reality. So and I don't know what's going to happen. I can't say what's going to happen, but that'll be the only thing that turns them around.
Yeah, I think it's going to take. I think it's going to take a microcosm in that party of what's happened for the country.
Yeah.
Somebody like a Harold Ford Jr. or somebody like that is going to have to be willing to take the tomatoes and have the balls to just stand up and say, you know what, you guys have lost your minds. You guys keep going the path you're going. Let's see where that gets you. Here's what I think we should do instead, and get away from the DEI stuff, get away from the open border stuff, get away from the, America's bad stuff, get away from if you have a young white child, they're supposed to hate themselves. Get away from all that stuff. Nobody likes that stuff, and get away from the the just pouring money at other societies and other people from other countries who come here illegally and just like give them a free ride while people here are eating top ramen still. Like if that's your the train you're going to be on, like good luck to you. I think people will endure that for a while. I think we've seen the end of it, and so I think it's going to take a version of not a bombastic guy like Trump necessarily, but a guy like Trump who's willing to say, you guys are wrong. I know I'm in the minority, but you are wrong. This is the way it's going to be. And they will start getting some momentum. Yeah. And then, or they're going to go the way of the Whigs. I really, truly believe that that's a very distinct possibility. I can see a world where they go away and it's like the two parties become Republicans and libertarians or something like that. I could totally see a version of that.
I suppose the question is whether, because they have had some, somewhat reasonable people in the party, but they've left. So I mean, Joe Manchin, he's gone.
Half the people in the cabinet right now are people who used to be in the.
Oh yeah, Tulsi Gabbard, RFK. RFK, last night, I left Trump's line last night where he says, "Oh, and RFK Kennedy, with a name like Kennedy, you would think these people would be all for him."
So, what do you say? They forget to so soon or something like that? Yeah. I mean, but that's kind of my point is they had those people, and like the big thing now is, on talk shows like what is it? Not just The View, but the one in the evening, like I don't know, CNN, MSNBC, whatever. They're evening shows, whatever they're. Right. They keep talking about how they need to get their Joe Rogan. And a newsflash, guys, you had your Joe Rogan. His name was Joe Rogan.
Yes, he was on your side. Yeah, exactly.
He was a Bernie bro in 2016.
Yeah,
not that much different than myself. Who I told you I voted for Obama the first time. And in the saying, it's funny. The same saying Ronald Reagan had applies today, which was, "I didn't leave the Democratic Party; they left me."
Yeah, right.
And it's the same. It's the same thing. And so I think that it's such a catastrophe now, though, and just the money that is going to waste as people are it's hard to get. It's not like it was 2 years ago where things were just everyone's just making money hand over fist. So it's not the case anymore.
Oh yeah.
And as people learn more about how much money is just being wasted, and the argument for that waste, just because it's the opposite of what Trump wants, I think that's going to have less and less. It's going to carry less and less water every few months.
You're saying, Brian, you're actually opposed to fund for the United States to fund transgender plays in El Salvador?
I absolutely am opposed to that. Yeah, I know. I know. I'm a transphobe. I'm a xenophobe. I'm a phobophobe. I'm all the phobes. What's the word for all the phobes? What a polyphobe? Would that be what I am?
I'll buy into that. I don't know.
Yeah. So on one hand, every week I think the momentum is turning, and then things like yesterday and a couple of these things we talked about happen. Like, nope, we haven't made a single step of progress, and it's really weird how that. Maybe it's just me, what I pay attention to, but it's really weird how that oscillates very, very rapidly.
But the oscillation, really, okay, so let's put that in context, though. So the oscillation is really over, 35 days, right? So because
I would go back as far as like I would
remember.
No, and Butler. I think Butler for sure, the election for sure, and then the inauguration. Those are like the big three benchmarks. Sure. And I think you're right. I think the oscillation's a faster pace and more severe now, but I think it started back in Butler, I would say.
No, I think that's true. I think what really sort of supercharged all this is how quickly, for instance, corporations and other major entities have dumped like DEI, and how quickly the tech bros have said, yeah, so you get Trump mentioning Apple's $500 billion investment and talking about Tim Cook and Elon used to be a favorite of the left too in years past. So you see the wholesale shift. I mean, it has surprised me. The wholesale shift.
But again, like the tech thing's a great example, because you're not even talking about for a year and a half now about how nobody changes until they have to. Until it personally affects them, nobody changes. Well, why do the tech guys change? Because it personally affected them. Two things were happening that just came to light like a couple months ago when Mark Andreessen started talking about this. Right. He's the guy who invented Firefox and all that, and whatever. Two things were happening. They were debanking guys who didn't have the right opinions in Silicon Valley. And the U.S. federal government came to Silicon Valley and said, hey, this AI thing is going to be a thing, but we're going to kind of control how it goes. And they said, we're going to let you know who the players are. We're going to let you know the rules. And this whole free economy thing, like, that's out the window for AI. Right. We're gonna have it done our way. And they all said, that's BS. I don't want to operate like that. So again, now it personally affected them. They had people with millions of dollars who couldn't get a bank. Yeah. Like, what do you do with millions of dollars, Dave, if you can't put it in a bank? Like, what do you do with it?
Exactly.
I honestly don't know. I mean, do you hire a security team to fly with you to Turks and Caicos? Like, honestly, I don't know how you would do it. Right. Yeah. So that happened. And then they took away all the entrepreneurialism around AI. Right. And okay, so like, if you're going to hamstring us, well, we're not going to support you anymore.
Right. Yeah. It's basic human nature. It's basic cause and effect.
Oh, it's so funny, Dave, how we're so sophisticated. We're on the verge of this singularity event, all this stuff, and still we behave like children, just like we did 2,500 years ago.
Human nature. It's always back to human nature.
All right. Well, as Dave mentioned, if you think there's something we got right in this episode and you're listening in current times, or you think there's something we got wrong, love to hear about it. Dave and I are trying to explain to future generations what this moment in time is like, trying to cover things that will not likely be in whatever version of a history book is in the future, and just talk about the what it feels like to live through this time, as they're undoubtedly going to look back and wonder what the hell are those guys thinking. So that's what we're up to. We'd love to get your feedback because Dave and I can only share our perspectives. We can't speak for everyone, obviously. And until next time, this is Dave and Brian signing off.
See you next week.
Do you want to be Unsilent? Make your voice heard on our social media channels and share where you think we got it right or wrong. Go to unsilentpodcast.com for social links so you can join the discussion.